So I know we're behind, and I'm going to try and go through this. I've been told to tell lots of jokes. As Anil said, he laughed more than he learned, and hopefully you'll say that as well today. I laughed. I don't remember what he said. He didn't say anything of value, but it was funny. And the sort of depressing thing about being in this point in the order is that all of my slides, all of the data that I have in these slides has already been shown multiple times. So what's that? Yes. So I think what we're going to do instead of me giving you a lot of data and information about local is we're going to talk about the inevitability of death and what it means for all of our career decisions, which is what Barbara was alluding to. She didn't want to say the word death. She didn't say the word death. I'll say it, death. There it is. Okay, and I quit my job at LSA, where I was VP of Strategy, in part because I'm in the midst of an existential crisis, which is a true statement. Okay, so I've been around for 20 years studying local in one form or another. I'm a kind of a weird person because I'm not an SEO practitioner. I'm not a search marketer per se, but I spend a lot of time with them. I write a lot about search. And I know a fair amount about it. So what I'm going to take you through today is what does local mean? Everybody's a local marketer in this room in one form or another because you work for organizations that have physical locations, but people get confused. I'll talk about the path to purchase, the core local strategy, location intelligence, how mobile location data is being used to do some very interesting things. I'll talk a little bit about voice and virtual assistants, which again, you've already heard about quite a bit, and then privacy, which nobody has talked about so far, but which is as important as anything else. What I'm not going to be talking about are digital advertising in most cases, machine learning or AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, connected cars, or antitrust. Rand did that quite a bit. So people know the allegory of the cave from Plato's Republic? Probably not. If you were a philosophy major or did anything around classical philosophy in college or subsequent to that, you would have heard of the allegory of the cave, which comes out of the Republic, which is a great work by Plato, which probably a good sleep aid for many people in the room if you want to take that up before bedtime. The basic idea is that most people don't perceive reality. They perceive shadows on the wall of a cave, which is an approximation of reality, but not reality itself. Very metaphysical, very meta. We heard about meta, just meta tags. This is my presentation. It is an approximation of reality, but not reality itself. There you go. Okay, so what do we mean by local? Everybody feel like they understand this? Do you guys know what, when somebody says local marketing, local search, you know what that means? Yes? Yes? Okay, so we can skip this part. I know what you're thinking. Let's do some free association here. It means nearby, small town, mom and pop, small business, main street, et cetera, et cetera. Independent local businesses, right? That's what most regular folks will think of when they hear the word local or local business. But they don't so much think about major brands. They don't think about chains. They don't think about franchises. They don't think about national brands that advertise on TV. But these are as much local businesses as these small mom and pops. Don't focus on the marketer, focus on the consumer behavior. It's all about the consumer intent and the point of sale. So you can throw things at me if I'm repeating information that you already know very well. Okay, most transactions happen in the physical world. Mary Meeker, anybody see this deck that she put out this year? The most anticipated slide deck in Silicon Valley, right? I like Mary Meeker, but it's a bunch of people who are junior to her that spend a lot of time aggregating third-party data. Anyway, she said e-commerce is 15% of U.S. retail. That's incorrect. It's about 10%. It has been growing. It's not 15%. But when you expand the aperture and you look at service businesses, right? You include service businesses, which is most of U.S. GDP. Online spending, where the transaction happens online, turns out to be about 3% of consumer spending. So it's a tiny sliver of the overall pie. Now, this is just quickly stands for the proposition that people buy within 20 minutes, basically, of their homes. They don't drive too much farther than that. Anybody drive very far to spend money on a daily basis, a weekly basis? No, you're going to go very close to your house, basically. So this is just support for the proposition that most spending is nearby. I'm trying to talk rapidly to make up time. Gen Z, more than millennials, they like to go to stores, but they also buy online. But, even though most of the transactions happen in the physical world, the internet and mobile influence them, right? This is an old stat, 2017 from Deloitte. A little more than half of every dollar spent is influenced by the internet in one way or another. So we all know this to be true. Now, path to purchase. I originally had 200 slides like this. I cut them down to 100. I know you'd rather have 300 slides like this. Anyway, so here's the funnel. We've heard about the funnel, right? So how many people work with this concept of the funnel in their jobs? Most people. We just heard Google talk about upper funnel, lower funnel, blah, 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 blah. It's a fiction, right? This is the allegory of the cave to some degree. It's a fiction. This is not how people actually behave. There is some logic to the way people behave, but this is too sort of rational to reflect reality. People do have a notion. I need to buy a blender, or I want to take a trip to Tulum, or whatever it is, and then they do research and then they make a decision. So in that sense, it is consistent, but it's not as linear and clean as that. Where am I supposed to be pointing with this? Back to the back of the room? To you? You're advancing the slide? I don't know where to point. Okay. All right. The purchase path is not linear, right? We all sort of get this now. This is a Facebook slide that I took from some Facebook presentation at some point. But basically, it illustrates the idea that people, this is an apparel purchase, I think. People bounce back and forth between channels, devices, media, they go to stores, et cetera, not linear, use lots of resources. This is sort of hard to see. 4 product categories. This is a Google-sponsored research. 4 product categories. Online, it's trying to map the path to purchase. Online only, online and offline, in different sequences. And what you see at the bottom is most people are using a combination of online and offline resources when they make these purchases. And this is laptops, TVs, wireless contracts, and clothes. I don't know why they picked those categories, but the larger proposition holds. So different research, well, actually, same research. 80% are researching online and buying offline, or researching offline and buying online. This is consistent with what everybody does, right? Yes? All right. So this is LSA research. When you're looking for local business, where do you go? Search engine, friends and family, email, social network, mobile app, video, websites, ratings and reviews. All of these data, there's 10,000 studies, and they all say similar things. They may have slightly different percentages. The point is, people use lots of different resources. So for travel, you can break it down into inspiration, planning, and decision making. And depending on the study, it's 20 weeks out, between 1 and 19 weeks, and then they get down to the bottom of the funnel. But in reality, it's a messy process. Stop looking at your phones. All right. This is Facebook research from 2014, so it's kind of old, but it illustrates, a semi-extended period of time, 30 visits, 225 Facebook visits, of course. So you should advertise on Facebook because there are a lot of people spending time there. That's what they are communicating by that, and then 80% of that is mobile. So, lots and lots of resources. It's very hard for marketers. So conceptually, you can understand all of this. This is really easy to get in a certain sense. My whole presentation is people use the internet and mostly buy things offline, and there's a pretty coherent strategy that you can use to try and reach those people, and then we can talk about questions. That's my whole presentation. But I'll go through the rest of the 167 slides. Lots of devices. This is all aggregated travel research, mobile search, social, mobile apps. You guys have these slides. You have access to them. Voice search. I'm very skeptical of all the voice search stats that exist, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. And when people talk about voice search, they typically fail to make the distinction between a smartphone where you're speaking into your phone, hey Siri or okay Google or whatever, or just pressing the mic, and then the smart speaker that doesn't have a screen. I think that's a very, very important distinction. Most of the stats that you see about voice search are about smartphones. Sometimes people do surveys that don't clearly delineate between the two, and it kind of confuses the discussion. Okay, mobile, primary device. So we just heard Google say 65% of search traffic was on mobile devices. So Google has not made an official statement about that for 4 years when they said it's crossed the 50% threshold. This is third-party data saying 58% of search is mobile. But if this was is the Google person still in the room? She's fled. She's a paid person. She would not. So you're effectively you're backtracking on her behalf. All right. So I'm gonna go ask Google about that stat. I'll say, hey Google, I was at this event and here was this person that worked for you and they said this thing. Can you confirm that? And they'll say, well, more than 50%, blah blah blah. So this is a third-party piece of data that says 58%. This is what Google said in 2015. It's more than 50% in a bunch of countries, but they have not given an official update in 4 years. So that's why I was very excited about that. This is other third-party data that shows different categories where how come my voice is doing a weird thing? My voice is doing a weird thing. Is that because I'm doing this with the mic? All right. See, I told you wouldn't remember anything. So these are different categories. Travel, unfortunately, is not on here. Food and beverage, automotive, health, and so on and so forth. This is the percentage of search queries that are coming from a mobile device by vertical. And that's how you get to an average of about 58%. So it's high in some. And it seems to have stabilized. So it seems to be pretty stable at 60-40. Sundar Pichai, the CEO, on an earnings call said, local search on mobile devices is growing faster than mobile search overall. 20% on the desktop. This is a very, very old number, 2010 or something. They have not updated that. And between 30 and 50% of mobile search is local. Their executives have said different things at different times. A third, 40%, 30% is the current official position. And then in 2012, there was a conference very much like this where some Google person said, it's 50%, right? So that was very exciting, but they've disowned that stat as well. So which of these is a local search? All of them. All of them are potentially local searches, right? I mean, if you're looking for a product, if you're looking for something near me, obviously, all of these things have the capacity to be a local search because, in my definition, in my view of the world, they may be fulfilled offline. People may make the purchase offline, right? You don't know the intent of the searcher when you start out. Like best blender for smoothies, you would not consider that a local search, right? Would you would consider it a local search? No, you think that's a straight up e-commerce purchase. But most people are going to buy that blender in a store. So if the marketer recognizes that and puts inventory in front of the person, like, hey, you can buy this blender, this Brayville blah 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 Hurricane blender at this local True Value hardware store, I may go and buy it there. And it essentially becomes a local search, even though it could be fulfilled online. Does that make sense to you? Am I making sense? All right. Okay. So Chandu Thota, who's a guy in Google who's one of their central people around location, has basically said Google treats all mobile queries potentially as local because there's such a high degree of local intent behind mobile queries. And my point just a second ago is that commercial queries, queries that have a commercial intent could almost all be potentially local, because you can fulfill them offline. And so that's an opportunity for local marketers. Moz, Rand's old firm. One day I hope to have a single name like Rand, where people can just say, But today I'm two names, Greg Sterling. What was that? Yes, I have the definite article in front of me. That's true. I have the definite article. So, okay. Moz, Rand's old firm, found in a study of 1.2 million search results pages that 73% of them had some local feature, like a local pack or some knowledge panel feature that had some location information in it, which is, I don't know the entire methodology behind this, and there may have been some keywords that were skewing local to begin with, but this is a pretty interesting stat, pretty high number. Okay, core local strategy. So this is really pretty simple these days. I mean, it's not simple to execute, very, very hard to execute, simple conceptually. You need a fast-loading website, page speed is a mobile ranking factor, you need to do organic, you've got milestones, so they'll take care of all this for you. Right? That's right. I'm done. You need to pursue organic SEO. Citations, however, are declining in importance. That's a longer conversation. You need to be on Google My Business if you're local, if you have physical locations, Facebook, and Yelp. And Drew from Yelp is here in I think the next session. You need to have reviews. How many people, for whom in the room are reviews important? Everybody in hospitality for sure. What? Yes, but reviews are an important thing. Yes, okay, great. Yes. Review, acquisition, and response. Best practice is 24 hours or less to respond. And then there's other stuff depending on who you are. So particular verticals, messaging, mobile apps, et cetera, may be more or less relevant to you. So this is basically the elements of a successful local strategy that you need to execute again on execution very, very, very hard. This is kind of a hard to read slide. ComScore data from 2009, this showed what they thought was the universe of local search sites at the time. A lot of internet Yellow Pages sites, MapQuest, City Guides, where AOL City Guide was in there. There was a bunch of folks in there. Google Maps grew in 2009. In 2007, 2008, it was sort of more in line with some of the others. So we had a much more competitive environment in the past. That's 10 years ago. Most of these guys have no traffic or gone. I mean, who's using MapQuest these days, right? Nobody. Okay, so this is what some people say the local universe looks like today. There are all these sites, all these apps. You've got to have your data everywhere. You've got to have them in these 10,000 places. What? Skepticism? Yes. Hence the question mark. No, it doesn't look like this. It looks like this. I mean, again, if you're in a particular industry, you may have your own version of TripAdvisor, like Zillow or whatever if you're in real estate. But this is really where you need to focus. You need to be on Apple Maps. You need to be on Facebook, Yelp, and Google. Google is the big one. Now, if you're talking about social media, I'm going to talk exclusively about Facebook. Instagram is increasingly important. WhatsApp may become important in the United States. But if you're on Facebook and you have multiple stores or locations, properties, all the action is on the local pages. So people think, oh, we can just do this corporate thing, top down, consolidate all our fans, respond to them from one central location. But multiple studies show that there's much, much, much more engagement for local pages, for your individual hotel properties or your individual dealers or your individual stores. That's where people want to interact. That's where the relevance is. Now, building an operation around that is very challenging. I was talking to True Value earlier about this. Very tough because in some cases you've got a local person who's less sophisticated than the corporate people. How do you delegate that responsibility? How do you protect the brand, etc.? This is another study that says the same thing. Less interaction on the corporate page, much more interaction on the local pages. Different study. So really briefly, I was involved in a study for a company that does reputation management, not Milestone. Milestone's the best. Work with Milestone. Yeah, I'm not getting paid for any of this. No, I'm not going to say I'm kidding. All right. Anyway, now you're really confused. What's the reality with this guy? Now I think it's time to start talking about death. All right, let's bring it down. Okay, so this was a study that I was involved in that I did with I carried it out. There was some underlying data mining done by another firm, but I did the scoring and I oversaw the study. So 163 leading franchise brands from Franchise Times and Entrepreneur, 15,000 local pages scored and reviewed in these verticals, right? 100-point possible total, that would be perfect score. And we looked at things like, did they have reviews? Were they responding to reviews? Did they have fully built out profiles? Were they generating local content? The average was 45, so less than half. The average score across all these 163 brands with multi-locations was 45.3, and the winners by category and overall were in the 70 to 89 point range. 89 was the most that any single company got. But what we found, and this is not causation, this is correlation, but it was interesting, is that the leaders had 3 times the sales growth of everybody else. So these were probably companies that were pretty progressive, had their head on correctly, and were executing because they recognized the value of these strategies. But as they did that, they were also probably reaping the benefits. So that was a kind of I can talk more privately about that study if you want. It's pretty elaborate. So there are some brands who say we don't want to deal with Yelp. We're frustrated by them. Their APIs, blah blah blah, whatever. I've heard this kind of thing. Yelp is an important site. There are many people who go there. Has very high intent, high conversion in many categories, but Yelp also ranks. So as an SEO strategy, you should have your profiles for your properties fully built out on Yelp, photographs, respond to reviews, because it's going to rank in the top results in a lot of these different categories, much more so than some of these other directories. Interestingly, Facebook is pretty far down the list there. Okay, so now Google, the Pac-Man of local. So the reason I said that it's the Pac-Man of local is because it's chewing up, eating up, swallowing, whatever metaphor you want to use, everything else. So 62%, so here are the top sources of local information. This is where people are going to get local information. It's Google My Business. This sort of plays into the zero-click meme. Not exactly, but it's consistent with that. So people are getting their information very often from Google, not clicking through. Then they go to the business website. They drill into the GMB profile in Google Maps. They go to a directory. We just saw that on the last slide here. One of these. Or none of the above. Those people don't get information. They cry, we, all the way home. No, I don't know. So one of the really interesting things that's happening with Google My Business is that it's moved from a information source where you're getting general information about the business, contact details, location, to what they're referring to as an engagement platform, a place where transactions are actually happening. So this is true in hotels, right? Increasingly, they're trying to control the booking, own the booking. You can get a quote, you can message the business, you can book a room, you can order food online, more and more things where Google is the sort of end-to-end transactions platform, and they're doing this in shopping as well. They want to help users, quote unquote, get things done. They want to control the process from beginning to end because they want to provide what they would regard as a consistent and better user experience. Not everybody is happy about that. How many people saw the survey about Google My Business products and services? Did anybody see that? No? So they put out a survey that went out to a lot of business owners and some local marketers, asking them what products and services through Google My Business would you be interested in, and what would you pay for? at what price. So it's suggested that they wanted to either introduce new services that they would charge a monthly fee for, or maybe charge for some of the things that they're doing now as part of a bundle. It's unclear. And it's unclear whether this will happen, but it was just a very interesting thing as an alternative revenue generator to advertising, a kind of a SaaS model. Okay, so what do you need to do in Google My Business? You need to verify all your listings. You need to fully build out the profile, photos, content. You need to monitor and respond to reviews. Everybody knows all this, right? You need to get those booking buttons enabled. You need to do Google Posts. Anybody doing Google Posts in the room? A few people. It's an underutilized tool. And Google Q&A. What about Google Q&A? People doing that? Yes? Someone said, of course. Who said, of course? Yeah. Yes, but not everybody is doing it, right? There's a lot of companies that are neglecting it. So Q&A is at once a kind of a new reviews platform. It's a way that people are sort of expressing their opinions about the brand. They're also asking questions about brands, and you want to be there to respond. You want to provide the information. There are also people who recommend that you seed Q&A with your own questions and answer your own questions. Hey, is this the best hotel in the world? Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. That kind of thing. That's a serious recommendation from some SEOs. Google now has 95 million local guides. People know what a local guide is? Local guides are people who answer questions about businesses, and they're incentivized to participate, and they correct things on Google Maps. And they're all over the world. Last year they had 50 million of them. Now they have 95 million people. 95 million people all over the world. And these are people who are writing reviews, and they are doing things like answering questions. And they may or may not know the answer to a question, but they may still provide the answer. So I think, does Google have an API around Q&A, or is that coming? It's okay, it exists. Yeah, all right. So if you're working with firms like Milestone, they have access to this through an API, and you can monitor and respond to these. But this is very important to pay attention to. As I said before, part content, part reputation. These Q&A, these questions and answers appear in the knowledge panel. Yeah, so how many people have seen these kinds of things on their phone? Do you know, like, I'll get one of these probably about the Hyatt later. Do you know, do they have free parking? Is there a spa here? That kind of stuff. And you go through and you answer these questions, and then they take the consensus and they build out their content. And so you want to be the one who's answering that to the extent possible. Provide as much information as you can. Google's local algorithm is based on a number of things, including relevance, distance, and prominence. You can't do anything about proximity because it's proximity to the searcher. So rankings are going to change based on where the searcher is. If I'm in San Jose, if I'm in San Francisco, et cetera. But prominence is tied to reviews, and that's something you have a lot of control over. So this is third-party data that shows if you have more and better reviews, you're going to get higher up in the rankings. It's counterintuitive because it seems like a lower number here, but what this shows is that if you have better rankings, it's going to result in, if you have better reviews, it's going to result in better rankings. Okay, real quickly, just worth a closer look on reviews. This is another study I was involved in. What is the number one influence? The question is, what is the number one influence consumer on your buying decisions? It's reviews. I mean, you'll find plenty of surveys on reviews, but this was very interesting. And above all other considerations, pricing, convenient location, websites, ads, social media, reviews seems to be the top influence. And we've got a lot of fake reviews, and that's a problem, but consumers are still pretty trusting of reviews. How do you make a decision when you look at reviews? You look at the most recent reviews, critical and favorable reviews equally, stars, total counts. So this pretty correspond to what you guys do as consumers, pretty much? Yes? You're looking at the most recent, you're trying to get a kind of a sense of what the consensus is. Why do you write reviews? Everybody thinks, oh, people only write reviews when they have a bad experience, but the opposite is true. Most people write reviews when they have a good experience and then when they had a bad experience. Now, here's a very, very important finding. Would you consider changing your review if your issue was addressed by the business? Most people don't engage with the reviewer in this way. And most people said, yes, I would change it. 31% if they were asked, if they were asked to change it based on the underlying issue. And then 58% said, I would consider changing it, but it would depend on the response. So there's a huge win-back opportunity here. If you address the issue that the reviewer is expressing concern or complaining about. It's almost 90% of the people that are writing critical reviews. How quickly do you have to respond? People who write critical reviews want a quick response, basically within 24 hours. And where do you go to look at reviews, consumer? You go to Google, then Amazon, then Facebook, Yelp, TripAdvisor, and so on. It would depend upon the vertical, but this shows you that Google is the number 1 review destination. And in the same survey where we looked at 163 franchise brands, somewhere between 15 and 16,000 pages, Google had, for the same locations, 100 locations for every brand, Google had twice the review counts of Facebook and more than 10 times the numbers of reviews that Yelp had for the same location. So this is really an existential threat to Yelp, in my opinion. The more people go to Google for reviews, the less they're inclined to go to Yelp. I mean, Yelp has its own arguments about why Yelp is better, but that's what I believe. Okay, so how am I doing on time? How am I doing on time over here? Good? I'm good? All right. Okay, so attribution. This is something we've heard quite a bit about today. Most people don't have a good understanding of attribution. This is a survey of marketers. Not excellent understanding of attribution, 90%. First click, last click. Binu talked about moving away from this. Google talked about moving away from this. You're getting a distorted picture of your media marketing channels when you look at either last click or first click, but yet this is what people are doing because this is a simpler and more straightforward way to try and get some sense of what's going on. This is a kind of hard to read chart, but basically it stands for the idea that the people who are clicking on your online ad campaigns are not necessarily the people who are visiting your store. This is ZenReach, which is a company that provides guest Wi-Fi and does email collection and other marketing activities. So what it shows is that 55% of the engaged online audience only translated into 25% of the people who came into the store. So the smaller audience that engaged online actually showed up in larger numbers or formed the largest proportion of store visitation. So it just stands for the idea that what's happening online is not necessarily a total reflection of what's happening in reality. Historically, people have not been able to track online to offline. This is the biggest thing going on the internet, and it's not been trackable for the most part unless you use coupons, which has always been a problematic thing. But now, people know all this stuff. I talked about it last year. In fact, this is the exact same deck as last year, slide for slide. No, I'm kidding. It's not. I don't even remember what I said last year. Everybody has a smartphone. Nobody in the room doesn't have a smartphone. 240 million people. This is basically, it's probably more than this. That's a conservative number, who use location services. Smartphones are the cookie for the real world. We'll talk about privacy in a minute. Everybody's walking around. Everything that you're doing is being tracked as you move from the Hyatt to the restaurant, back to the hotel, et cetera, et cetera. So what this means is physical location has been translated into intent or identity. So your location history equals your identity. I'm a business traveler. I shop at Whole Foods. I'm go to the gym occasionally, not as much as I should, and sometimes I go to concerts. And so you can put all these things together about me and figure out who I am. You can put me in the business traveler bucket. You can put me, if I were a first class person, if I were going to the Centurion Lounge in the airport, or if I were going into the whatever the United Polaris Lounge, you could say, oh, this guy is a first class traveler, and so I want to target him because he's probably in a certain income group or whatever. So this is data that can be used to segment audiences, and also it's for attribution. So you can ask all kinds of questions of location data. Who are the audiences? Who are my customers? Who's going into my competitors' stores? Did the online campaign affect store visitation? Which media channels are most effective? Et cetera, et cetera. And you can do all kinds of stuff with this data. People just have no idea how much can be done. I mean, if you're starting to read the articles that talk about how you're tracked all the time and, all the sensitive information that is being captured, this is it. It can be used for good or for evil, as the case may be. That's what The Great Hack is about on Netflix. You should watch that. You can also do attribution, right? So a device ID and ad ID can be matched to any medium that exists: out of home, TV, voice, direct mail, digital out of home. Everything pretty much can be tied together, and you can see what is driving people into stores, and you can do multi-touch attribution now with this. Who saw the ad campaign tied to the device? I'm at home, I'm watching a TV show, those things can be matched, and then I go into Target. All of that can be reported. Closing the loop. Okay, but what about this? Privacy, big deal. I'm pretty much over time, but I'm coming to the end here. Very important. Talk about it in a second. Voice and virtual assistants. These are some market share numbers based on a Microsoft survey. How many smart speakers? Who doesn't have a smart speaker? Who does not have a smart speaker? Does not have a smart speaker. So, a third of the room. All right. Who has a smart speaker in every single room in their house? All right. I'm there. I have so many of them, I'm giving them away. Turn to your neighbor and rub their hands. Sorry, Barbara Waxman. All right. She's not here, so I can say that. All right. 100 million of these devices in people's homes. 112 million if you extrapolate the numbers. What do people do? This is mostly smartphones, not smart speakers. But Microsoft failed to distinguish in this survey. Searching for a quick fact, that's search. Asking for directions, searching for a business. People are doing all kinds of things. However, these devices, the smart speakers, have not lived up to their potential yet, have not lived up to the hype. Bing, voice search, 40% is local intent, blah, blah, blah. People want answers, not links, right? They want the snippet, they want the single answer. They don't want to have a bunch of choices that they have to sift through. Smart speakers impacting usage of other devices to some degree, meaning people are using other devices somewhat less. Who has any apps, any Alexa apps that they use on any kind of regular basis? 80,000 of them? Nope, nobody's using them. Big bust. Complete, that sucks, basically. So, there are a lot of things about the user experience that still have to be figured out before these devices realize their potential, and they may never realize their full potential, although there are so many of them in people's homes. And then you've all read this kind of stuff, heard this kind of stuff. They're recording you when you're having sex, when you're confessing all your sins. That's all going to Amazon and Google now. And people are listening to it and laughing at you behind your back. All right, so there's some indication that people's privacy concerns about security are impacting their desire to buy more of these devices. There's some indication of that. Now, the final section here, privacy and consumer trust. You all know what GDPR is. That took effect in Europe. It didn't impact tons of companies in the US. California Privacy Act hits January 1. There still may be changes in the law, but that's going to be a big deal. GDPR is opt-in to collect data. CCPA is opt-out, but as a practical matter, we're moving to an opt-in privacy framework. This is a survey that asks people in the US and the UK, do you believe online privacy is even possible? People were happy in March 2018. Yes, it is possible. Now, no, it's not possible. People are resigned to the fact that everything that they do is going to be mined and exploited. But the danger in that is that they are less willing to share data, they become cynical, and they become less engaged. So what you want to do as a brand is you want to cultivate their trust. You want to give them confidence, especially as we move into a first-party world. Amazon put aside Alexa on the slide I just showed you. People have more confidence in Amazon about data security and privacy, and so this may be one of Amazon's hidden competitive advantages over other retailers. So this is an issue. Nobody wants to deal with privacy. It's a painful, complicated issue, but we have to deal with it. And it's ultimately good for brands, because brands that give their customers confidence and treat them with transparency are going to ultimately win in the marketplace. And when you are transparent, you see more opt-in rates. Okay, that's the end. I probably don't have any time for questions, but if you questions, yes? Okay. All right. Now you can applaud. Sorry about so many slides and so many data slides. So, does anybody have any questions? No? Oh, you do.
It's a quick question, but on the one slide you showed about reviews, TripAdvisor was 25%, but so is that you're not just focusing on hotels then in that, right?
No, that was just a generic question about where do you go to look for reviews. It wasn't industry specific.
Gotcha.
So if that were industry specific, TripAdvisor would be much higher. It would be like number 1 or 2 or something. Yeah. Anything else? People understood everything perfectly? Was it? What?
Yeah,
it's an ostrich. Put your head in the sand. It's actually a special headless bird. Okay. Oh, there's question?
we're
out of time.
We're out of time.
Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Thank you.